If you ever shared a meal with him, laughed with him, traveled with him, if you ever celebrated Mardi Gras with him or sat on a board with him, you know that the homily for Joseph Daniel Bouligny Sr. has already been preached. If you've ever stayed up late eating ice cream and watching movies with him, if you've ever gotten up early to have coffee milk and specialty cinnamon rolls with him, if you've ever fought over the last straight banana in the house, you know that the homily for Papa or Pops has already been preached. If you ever had the privilege of watching him dance with his beloved Jackie, if you ever watched him care for the Malta Malades in Lourdes, France, if you ever watched him help nurture hospice here in Acadiana, or watched him transform something plain and ordinary into something exquisitely beautiful, you know that the homily for our beloved Dan has already been preached. It's hard to believe, but most of us were here just weeks ago, July 23rd, when we commended Dan's beloved Jackie to the Lord. The time between July 23rd and last Monday has been an incredible pilgrimage of life and love and suffering and tears for Dan and the Bouligny family. As mentioned, at Jackie's funeral, the Davises and the Boulignys grew up together. They were on the high ground on the road of Kings, and we were on the drive of Beverly, separated only by a few homes and the South Side sewer plant on the Bayou Vermilion. I had lost touch with Dan until I returned to Lafayette after a 10-year stint as a faculty member at Notre Dame Seminary in New Orleans, better known as the Priest Factory. I returned to Lafayette in 2007 to become pastor at the Church of Our Lady Queen of Peace in Upper Lafayette. And one of my first visitors was Dan. "Father, I'd like to come see you." "Of course, Dan, come on over." Into the office he came, warm, delightful smile, and then all business. "Father, I'm attempting to establish the local chapter of the Federal Association of the Order of Malta here in Lafayette. Are you familiar with Order of Malta?" "Yes, I am, Dan. My godfather's a member down in New Orleans. I love the work of Malta, so admire their passion for defending the faith and taking care of the poor and the sick." He said, "I'm glad you know, because I would like you to be the chaplain." I said, "Well, Dan, should we maybe check with the bishop?" "Father, if you think we have to, but I've pretty much decided." I said to myself, "Now, Dan, I know you were the bicentennial King Gabriel in 1976, but that was a long time ago. I don't think you're king anymore." I didn't tell him that. Thus began a new chapter in our friendship. And I'm so grateful that the Order of Malta has turned out in such a powerful, loving way today, and taking such passionate interest in commending Dan to the Lord and the ways that the oldest lay Catholic organization in the church would like it done. Dan was the founding hospitaller of the order, and to see him light up as the order grew and matured and embraced more and diversified ministries just made him so happy. Dan had a confident vision, and when he locked in on his vision, as his family can testify, it was hard to talk him out of it. When we met on Thursday to talk and share, I mentioned that next to the definition of stubborn in the dictionary is Dan's picture, and they all laughed. But that confident, stubborn approach to life served him well in so many arenas. As we worked together, especially when I began to take advantage of his amazing gifts as an interior designer, I began to realize that much like your surgeon, you don't want your interior designer to be wishy-washy, lacking in confidence. You want someone to be able to say, Father, this is beautiful and this is not. And he could do that with the best of them. He had a clarity about him that just allowed me as a pastor to join him in a creative dance. Shortly after our friendship was renewed, I asked him to come up with a design to paint the interior of the Church of Our Lady Queen of Peace. Well, he was excited. And he came back with the Bouligny design. Those of you who have walked with Dan in his design career know that it wasn't boring and it was colorful. Presented it to the parish. They were a little tentative, but again, confident, clear. Dan ruled the day, and the painting began. Powerful, beautiful. Brought new life to the church and new enthusiasm to the faith of the people of Queen of Peace. And it allowed me to see him really at his best. His vision, again, of taking something plain and ordinary and making it beautiful in his own unique way. I brought an exhibit to display today. Father Trahan said, "Why are you bringing a chair to the funeral?" I said, "I need a prop. I need this." When Dan first saw this chair, it was like any other chair. Basically an end chair for a set of chairs around the table, but at Queen of Peace, it was the presider's chair. It was the priest chair. We didn't have a real cool chair like Father Trahan at the time. We just had this one. And it was white, fabric, kind of stained, kind of boring. And Dan said, "Father, in the midst of this project, I'd like to do a little something with the chair." He did it. And as he brought it back, looking so beautiful, he just couldn't help himself to mention, the fabric is from Russia. Of course it is, Dan. Absolutely. The vision to transform a chair allowed him to transform homes and offices and churches all over the state, and to enjoy the respect and admiration of designers all over the country. He was confident, he was clear, but he was also incredibly compassionate. In the midst of this painting project, his idea was the boring white ceiling would become just a dusty blue indicating the sky, right? He loved blue. He had local guys in the parish doing the painting. We had scaffolding, and I'm saying Mass as they start painting the ceiling. They had painted during the night, and I'm looking up. It wasn't a dusty light blue. It looked like blue cotton candy. It was bright and sweet looking, and it really, I knew it just couldn't be what Dan wanted. So I finished Mass, and I got on the cell phone. I said, Dan, where are you? He was on his way to Baton Rouge to have his car fixed, service for the automobile. I said, Dan, I think we got a problem. The guy started painting the ceiling, and I'm pretty sure this is not the color you wanted. He turned around and came back and walked in, and with confidence and clarity and compassion said, Father, you're right, that's not the color, and fixed it as only he could. His compassion for the design and decor of our church was marvelous. But to see his compassion when our church caught on fire and had to be rebuilt was inspirational. Dan and the Order of Malta came to the rescue, securing a grant from the national office to help us in our rebuilding efforts. Paul David, Dan's successor, along with his bride, Marla, just ran with it. And they, through their generous efforts, inspired the people of Queen of Peace to understand the truth, that they weren't alone and they had nothing to fear. The compassion Dan showed in his trips to Lourdes with the Malades of Malta and in the healing masses we had here in Acadiana, again demonstrated for me that God had poured in this compassionate spirit and allowed God's compassionate spirit to come out of him to those who were most in need. His work building up hospice, and as Father Louis can testify here, one, because Dan's from Abbeville, as Father Louis is, and also because Father worked with him and the hospice community. His desire to make sure that hospice took root here in Acadiana and flourished, I believe, was an amazing example of his compassion. Confident, clear, compassionate, and courageous, especially as he walked through the School of Suffering with his bride Jackie, and then on his own pilgrimage in these last months. I don't believe in accidents or coincidences. I only believe in God incidences. And I don't think it's an accident or coincidence that Jackie and Dan's intense walk through the School of Suffering happened during the extraordinary Jubilee year of mercy that Pope Francis has given the Universal Church as such an amazing gift. The year of mercy that began last December 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and the year that will draw to a close on November 20th, the Feast of Christ the King. This year of mercy has been such a great gift for the Universal Church. And Dan and his family, the Order of Malta, his parish, his friends, have jumped into this ocean of mercy in such an amazing way. The Lord revealing to St. Faustina that he saves an ocean of mercy for the greatest sinner. And that gave Dan such great courage. And the prayer for the Jubilee year of mercy composed by our Holy Father, Pope Francis, my favorite line reads this way: "You will that your ministers would also be clothed in weakness, in order that they may feel compassion for those in ignorance and error. Let everyone who approaches them feel sought after, loved, and forgiven by God." Let everyone who approaches your baptized Christians feel sought after, loved, and forgiven by God. In speaking with his precious family and many friends, part of the transformation that Dan experienced as he walked through the School of Suffering was just an amazing openness to God's divine mercy and an amazing ability to let that mercy flow through him to all of you. Intentionally seeking to make amends, intentionally seeking the gift of forgiveness and blessing, intentionally seeking after the amazing grace that comes when life and love is shared between family and friends. Powerful, beautiful, inspirational, as it should be for all of us. He was transformed by the divine artist. And the best part of Dan's ministry as an artist was, as his daughter Nicole reminds us, he always gave God the glory. When he was thanked and affirmed for transforming something ordinary into something beautiful, he would say, "Thank God. Thank God that I was able to receive a gift, and thank God that I was able to use the gift. Thank God that Dan let his light shine, not perfectly, but passionately and generously." He was confident, he was clear, he was compassionate, and he was courageous. And he would say that it wasn't the chairs or the churches or the homes or the offices that he was able to transform that gave him the most joy. It was his amazing children, his amazing grandchildren, his precious sister, the in-laws and outlaws that were a part of the Bouligny family, who gathered often to celebrate life and love with him, especially in an amazing, loving way in these last weeks. He fought the good fight. He finished the race. He kept the faith. And for those of you who had the privilege of knowing and loving our friend, I believe he didn't have to ask the question that Thomas posed in the gospel today. "Lord, where are you going? We don't know the way." Because Jesus told Dan as a little boy, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And that truth, that way, that life that is Jesus Christ was his gift from heaven, and the gift that he shared with all of us, passionately, generously, artistically, faithfully. Amen.